President of the New York Republican Club. Thanks for being here tonight, Gavin.
Thank you for having me. Always great to be here.
Right, so I know sanctions could make energy costs even worse for us here at home, but what do you make of this recent White House messaging attempt to retroactively attribute all of our inflation and all of our high gas prices to the Ukraine situation?
Well, it goes beyond just economics. I mean, they're trying to pin all of the country's, disasters that are going on right now on this impending, self-created Ukraine crisis. I mean, this is basically their distraction. It's a distraction from the domestic front. It's a distraction from Canada and everything that's happening across the broader Western world. So it's a convenient excuse. It obviously is not based in facts or reality, but usually these woke leftist talking points rarely are. And what we're seeing is basically a regime that's flailing around, desperate to find excuses for their own failures and looking for anything to get the public's attention off of them and onto something else. And if it means a war, it means a war. This is how they think in D.C., and that's what's going to lead our country down a pretty terrible path in the years to come.
And you've previously said on social media that inflation historically can break regimes. Do you think that may be something that the Biden regime right now is pretty worried about behind closed doors?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, inflation is inflation. They can't really gaslight their way out of this. If the price of something goes up, it goes up. If people's rents are going up, it goes up. I mean, they cannot lie. They can't use the media to the same extent that they could, do in other types of issues and controversies and crises. In this case, as far as inflation is concerned, it's going to be extremely damaging for the Biden administration's political ambitions going into the midterms and going into 2024. Inflation has historically played a role in presidential election cycles, making or breaking the incumbent party. And historically, throughout history, with different regimes going back to the French Revolution, inflation has played a very critical role in the rise and downfall of different regimes. So it is something that they're certainly worried about. And you can see that they're already beginning to come up with a narrative that is best suited for their objectives, which is to blame it on Ukraine. But the damage has already been done, and there's very few options on the table for the Biden administration to bring inflation back in without causing further economic catastrophe or sacrificing on their left-wing agenda.
So help me to understand something here. Canada and the U.S. both jail political opponents, as we've seen. They're now trying to defend another country that also jails its political opponents against a country that also jails its political opponents. Of course, those countries respectively, Canada, the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia. So, and of course, all this is being done under the guise of democracy. At this point, what does that word even mean?
It means nothing. All democracy means today is that the left's preferred political party is in charge in these different countries and regions. That's all it means. That doesn't actually mean anything about freedom, about liberty, about egalitarianism, about the democratic process. Nothing. That's all just a ruse. It's a failing ruse, as demonstrated with the polling that they were referencing in that press conference. So all they have to do now is simply say, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, and that's about the depth of their, philosophy as it comes to foreign affairs or interventionism. I mean, Ukraine is a corrupt oligarchic state. The only difference really between them and Russia is that the oligarchs in Ukraine work with people like the Bidens and other corrupt U.S. officials, while Russia, it's kind of on their own. Obviously, there's a lot more differences there. I'm being a bit facetious, but it's absolutely ridiculous that the United States or any country in the West, for that matter, is going to lecture Russia on human rights abuses and all these other, litany of things when they themselves are guilty of plenty of human rights abuses, especially during the era of this COVID biomedical fascism. I mean, what we've seen in Canada, what we saw previously in Australia, New Zealand, and even in our own country is absolutely reprehensible, all done under the guise of fighting a pandemic. So we're really in no position to lecture anyone. This is not about good versus evil, the good guys winning the day. This is simply about trying to protect a state that's a thorn in the side to Russia, and Russia is a nationalistic Christian country that has been a thorn in the side to the globalists' agenda. So they're trying to do everything they can to isolate Russia, to marginalize Russia, and to expand these institutions, these global institutions' control over more areas of the world. And Ukraine is just the latest battleground in that fight.
And switching gears here, before I let you go tonight, we talked about how the word democracy means nothing anymore, at least not what it used to mean. Now also I want to look at the term Republican, because of course you are in New York State, you're very involved in the politics there. So I have to ask you, what does the word Republican even mean? Because I see now there is a man, Harry Wilson, who's running as a Republican for governor of your Empire State, and he's someone who previously served in the Obama administration. He's someone who's from the Wall Street background. What's going on right now in New York when it comes to the governor's race?
There's this ridiculous notion that pervades in Republican circles that all that matters is winning elections, that it doesn't matter who you have to put up, what principles you have to sacrifice. As long as we get someone with an R next to the name elected, that's all that counts. But in reality, we know this is not true. We've seen many governors in states like Massachusetts, Maryland, Vermont, et cetera, who are Republicans just in name only. I mean, as far as their policies are concerned, many of them are indistinguishable from many Democrats, even left or liberal Democrats. So to me, winning elections has always been a means to an end, not an end in of itself. The strategy behind Wilson here is to propose the Charlie Baker of New York, someone who is going to win over, some liberals in the Empire State, and that's somehow going to get us elected. I mean, the entire notion of this is just plain wrong. I don't think it makes sense from an electoral strategy perspective. I don't think he's electable at the state level. What you need in New York is you need someone who's going to form a working class populist coalition who's going to bring together new people, bring them to the table. You're not going to win by trying to out-Democrat the Democrats. I mean, in addition to serving in the Obama administration, he also donated at least $1,000, if not more, to Alvin Bragg, who is the new Manhattan district attorney, who has decided that all crimes in New York pretty much are not going to be enforced or not going to be prosecuted, up until basically short of murder. So he endorsed someone who's completely a lawless leftist wacko, but we're supposed to believe that Harry Wilson is going to be the sensible, good government type of Republican that we need to turn Albany around. I'm just not buying it. I'm not buying it based on his donations. I'm not buying it based on how he's presenting himself. What we need is a true fighter in New York. We need someone who's going to be the Trump of New York to really turn this state around and drastically. We're not going to do that by, supposedly winning, with a liberal Republican who's going to just go along to get along.
I know, I thought it was just kind of a perfect encapsulation of where the GOP currently stands right now, that you can have an Obama official who changes nothing about himself, but now he can easily run under the guise of, oh, I'm a Republican. And I just think it really speaks to the ossifying nature of the Rhino establishment GOP. So I'm glad to see you and others really starting to take the party in a better direction, a more true to the core of the mission type way. But Gavin, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.